Hello, everyone.
So I'm quite excited to be in this webinar for the time being, because this is the first time I'm co-hosting this webinar with my colleague, Andy Kimbry, who has joined the organization. How long ago, dude?
A month and a half.
Month and a half ago. By the way, I met Andy through one of my training programs. It was a great person to join in one of my classes, and we kicked off, and we are looking for more siblings who can join our team. If you are a facilitator, a person who can bring people together, we would love to have you in our team, in our organization. And if you're interested to know more about this role, drop a note to hello@Leadership Tribe, and we'll be more than happy to introduce what are the upcoming roles we have and take you from there. Just without further ado, I would like to kick off this webinar with sharing a couple of the interesting points, what we're going to do. On a very high level, we have what we'll be doing today is we'll be talking for the next 45 to 60 minutes. And this webinar is being recorded. And after the webinar, we will be sharing the recorded video as well as the deck, as long as we have an email address which we can share that with you. And we do have a Q&A session. Of course, the session is very limited. If you have more questions after these sessions, feel free to drop us a note on LinkedIn or an email to hello@Leadership Tribe. And use the chat window in the Zoom chat window where everyone, including the panelists, can see. Let's do a small test. Where are you dialing from right now? Can you type it in the Zoom chat window, please, so we can all see? Or in your chat window where you can see. Okay. Peter from San Diego. We got David from Horsham. We got Ayub from India. And we got Bonupriya from Switzerland, Antonio from Philadelphia. Hello all. So, and we got Kiran from Pune, and I see that most people are joining from most parts of the world. Love it. So, my name is Krishna Chodipillai. I'm the Chief Storyteller for Leadership Tribe. And Andy, as I introduced you before, he's a Chief Mad Scientist. Without further ado, I would love to hand over to Andy. Andy, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Krishna. Thank you for that introduction. And welcome, everyone. So we're going to talk about data and metrics, but we want to get the basics right first. So we're going to drop a poll in for you. I want to hear from you. What is the difference between data and metrics? Do we have that poll?
Looks like a poll is not working, Andy.
It's always the way.
Oh, got it! It's working! Let me launch it! Yes! So,
there we go.
Oh, the answers are coming in.
Yeah. A lot of agreement here as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Andy, did you come up with the first option? Data is used by the team and metrics is used by the leaders?
That's obviously false.
Okay, let me end the poll.
So yes, so data is raw information, whereas metrics is processed data, which we use to measure success. One way of looking at that is if you torture the data for long enough, it will confess the metrics. So in this webinar, we're going to be talking about metrics. What are the wrong metrics? what are the right metrics, and how we can use those metrics to change the game. How many of you are interested in changing the game rather than playing the same old game? Type in the chat window, yes, if you're interested in changing the game.
There are a lot of yeses.
A lot of yeses. So we talked about good and bad metrics, but first let's look at the ugly metrics. So in 1999, the first interplanetary weather satellite, the Mars orbiter, was lost because NASA was using metric units and the contractor was using imperial units. So this $125 million probe crashed into the atmosphere and was completely lost because they were using the bad measurements. Another example, and I love this example because I remember reading about this in the news when it first came out, that in June 2000, to mark the new millennium, London got a new footbridge linking the Tate Modern in the south to St Paul's Cathedral over the River Thames. But what happened was that people noticed when they started walking on it that the bridge was wobbling when they were walking across the bridge. The designers blamed it on the way that Londoners walk. You've got, Krishna, you're live from London. Do you have a funny walk?
After listening to you, Andy, looks like I might have a funny walk. Thank you very much.
So what happened was they had to close the bridge and it had to be reinforced and wasn't reopened again until February 2002. So that's another example of using bad measurements. In this case, maybe Londoners walking, causing a catastrophe. So I want to talk about a case study as well of something that's quite close to my heart. This is DoSomething.org, one of the largest non-profit volunteer platforms exclusively for young people to drive social change and civic action. So in 2011, they launched a video on YouTube to promote one of their campaigns called their game-winning drive, which was to donate sports equipment to youth in need. And it gathered 1.5 million views, which is over twice as many as any of their other videos. Now that sounds like a success, but when the data was analyzed, it showed that as a result of this campaign, only 8 people signed up and 0 donations were made from these 1.5 million views. What they realized was they were measuring the wrong thing. The goal of the video wasn't to just get views, it was to generate donations. So they were able to inspect and adapt and look at new ways of driving donations through their campaign. There is a happy ending though. By the end of the campaign in 2017, over 55,000 people had donated over 25,000 bits of sports gear to disadvantaged youth in America. And I think that's a great success story in the end. So, I want to talk about adaptive metrics and what are adaptive metrics and how we can use them. But first of all, to understand adaptive metrics, we need to look at leading and lagging indicators. And we've got another poll for you here. And I want to know what you think what are the difference between leading and lagging indicators? Some answers coming in, cool. Oh, I see some disagreement in this, not as unanimous as the last poll.
5 more seconds, Andy. We'll be closing the poll.
5 more seconds.
There we go. Let me share some results. Ooh, yeah. 67%. Leading means looking forward, lagging means looking backwards.
And yes, that is what we're talking about here. where a lagging metric measures something that has already happened. It's in the past. And a leading metric is something that indicates or allows us to adapt something in the future and change the game. So let's use COVID as an example of this. So a lagging metric in the pandemic is, an example of a lagging metric is the number of vaccinations. These people have already been vaccinated. It's in the past, it's already happened. Whereas a leading metric is the number of positive tests within the community. So we all know from the data from looking back over the last 2 years that as positive tests go up, the number of hospitalizations tends to increase within 2 weeks as well. So what this does, this leading metric allows us to plan better and adapt our plans, which is why we call them adaptive metrics, to allow the healthcare system to add vaccine boosters, to add hospital equipment, allows us to change the game by adapting. And while we're talking about this, just a big thank you to all of the healthcare workers and frontline workers from over the last year and into the future as well. You are true heroes to all of us. So we can use these adaptive metrics to help drive behavior. For example, tracking customer satisfaction means that you can adapt your plans to focus on certain areas where customer satisfaction might be lacking. And the same can apply to your people, your employees, and your team satisfaction within your organization. In this way, adaptive metrics can also be value-based metrics. But we need to find a balance between these. If you focus 100% of your energy on customer satisfaction and 0% of your energy on your employee satisfaction, your employees aren't going to be very happy. So balancing these metrics is very important as well. And we have another case study, which we call Irish coppers. So this is an example of how metrics could also lead to bad behavior. So in 2017, the Irish police were under a lot of scrutiny for falsifying millions of breathalyzer results. Now, their objective was to reduce the amount of drink driving that was happening in the country, but the metric that they were using was the number of breathalyzer tests administered. So in order to hit their targets, they made them up. Can you believe that, Krishna? They actually made up millions of fake breathalyzer results just to hit their targets. So this is similar to, you may have experienced something like this in your organization when people ask, are you on time? Or are you within budget? And people fabricate those numbers just to make themselves look good. How many people have ever seen that behavior before? Type yes in the chat if you've experienced this. A capital yes. So yes, using metrics. Using these adaptive metrics can drive good and bad behavior, and we need to make sure that we are trying to drive the good behavior. Now, here's a big topic. Climate change is a great example of using adaptive metrics to drive behavior, and something that I strongly believe in as a really important cause. So when we're looking at leading metrics, adaptive metrics like global temperature, carbon dioxide levels in the sea and in the atmosphere, we can use these metrics, and governments around the world are using these metrics to drive behavior of organizations towards reducing carbon emissions, towards recycling, and also driving behavior of citizens towards things like using electric cars over petrol or diesel cars. I think it's important. When it comes to climate change, we all want to change the game. We all want to leave our planet in a better place. And we can use adaptive metrics for that. So did you know that you can also use adaptive metrics to measure agility? The CMMI is a model that dates all the way back to 1987 and is still used by some of these clients that we work with, and it works. So it's a simple model with just 5 steps but it's a metric that you could use to identify, is your organization or your team, are they at level 2, the managed level, where processes are often reactive? Well, if that's the case, we can look forward, we can adapt and change the game to say, how do we get up to level 2, level 3, where we're defined? How do we change our processes from reactive to proactive? And we can use that metric to help drive the behavior within a team level or even at an enterprise level. We've seen both in the clients that we've worked with. So let's do a quick recap so far. The Mars orbiter already crashed once. We want to look forward. So we talked about data and metrics, how leading indicators can be used for adaptive metrics. We've seen how bad measurements can cause catastrophes, like your Mars orbiters and your London bridges, and how metrics can drive behavior, good and bad. And we've looked at some real-world examples that are using adaptive metrics to change the game, even on a global scale. I want you to watch out for AUMs, artificial useless measurements. This is a brand new 3-letter acronym that was invented in 2020 by Jim Johnson over at Standish Group. And one of the things that Jim Johnson says is, where Scrum is concerned, you might consider velocity as an artificial useless measurement. Why? Because none of those measurements involve value or customer satisfaction. So I love this cartoon. When you see a artificial useless measurement, call it out. Krishna, what do you think about Jim Johnson's view on velocity there? I agree with it. I agree.
I can't agree even more, because using those artificial useless metrics has led to organizations drive innovation in, let me share something. Organizations who've been using artificial useless metrics, they're so superficial and mechanical, and there's so much kumbaya, and they celebrate over wrong things. Keep on doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different outcome. So how do we bring those adaptive metrics at the enterprise level? For this, ladies and gentlemen, I would recommend you to start thinking about system thinking. So how many of you heard about system thinking? What's the first thing which comes to your mind? Type it in the chat window, please. What the first thing which comes to, what's the first thing which comes to your mind? Type it in the chat window, please. Because optimizing the system as a whole, okay. Austin, sounds easy, but it's actually very tough. Agreed. And many more answers are coming. I can't agree more. So when you're talking about system thinking, there are a few things I want you to look at. Forget about systems, integrations, whatever you're thinking about, just wipe the slate clean for a second. The intent here is, look at system as a planetary system. Look at system as a family. How many of you are part of a family? If you're part of a family, type yes. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, when you're thinking about a system in your families, are there structures? Are there interdependencies? Is there a hierarchy? Is there a structure or a process when guests come to your house? With all the good intentions, sometimes shit happens. And I was a pain in the back for my parents as a kid. I loved a little bit of an adrenaline sports. And one of them was going down the mountain on a motorbike without helmets or in any gear. How much pain I caused for my family? I know. And my dad can vouch for that. So ladies and gentlemen, when you're thinking about a system, it's a web of interdependencies. So when you have these interdependencies, how do you work with them? So looking at a bigger picture and asking, how do we bring change adaptively? For this, there are a few questions, there are a few things I want you to look at, ladies and gentlemen. When you're trying to look at bringing adaptive metrics for the organization, what is the best framework? What is the best way to measure success? What is the right organization structure? What is the culture we're trying to build? What is the flow of value we're trying to bring in? Using this as some of the indicators and asking yourself, where do we bring value in? And from there, you measure what matters. You measure what matters. Next week, I'll be spending some time working with some enterprise coaches, working in those areas on how do you build those adaptive metrics, or how do you bring change at an organization level? So how do you build agility in the organization? Yes, metrics plays one important role. And if it's not been looked after carefully, it can doom your transformations. It can doom your transformations. So, ladies and gentlemen, out of curiosity, the change what you're trying to bring in, what is the most important thing for you to be successful? In any change you want to bring in, what is the most important thing for you to make it successful? One thing you can think of. Type it in the chat window, please. Mindset. Manish says business impact. Vikash is talking about creating an urgency for change. Value. Antonio is talking about bringing value to the business faster. Can't agree more. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a term called economic value. Economic value means, can we reduce the cost of delivery or increase more? Do both simultaneously. For that, you need to measure what matters for the organization, and you need to look at system, look at your organization in the big picture. Any changes you make here, how does it impact in the overall picture and the flow? So these are some of the areas we looked at. So the question what I would like to ask you is, if there are changes you're trying to bring in, if there are cultural changes what you want to bring in, what are the kind of metrics you need to look at? These are the questions you need to ask in your organizations, in your teams. Start with your teams. What are the things we need to do to make a difference? It starts from there. And for that, there are other things which we also need to take into consideration for them. Understand what agility is, what lean stands for. Lean is about eliminating the waste and making the flow much better so that the value is being delivered throughout the system. And how do you bring agility in a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environments? Let's look at what happened in the last 2 years. COVID happened, and now the war in Russia. Drastically, things are changing every single day. And when markets are changing, when inflation is going up, how do we adapt to the situation? So these are the questions I leave you with. So on this note, let me pause for a minute and take some questions. Andy, looks like our team are speechless. Our virtual participants are speechless. I do love what Mansi has said. It's about the leadership alignment. What else? So on this note, I would like to ask you a question. What is that one takeaway you have by attending this webinar? Type it in the chat window, please. Julian talks about the idea of AUM. Peter talks about not all metrics are useful. Bonnie Priya talks about Andy's smile and positive attitude. Thank you very much, Bonnie Priya. Because don't measure something just for the sake of measuring it. It must have some value. Austin, adaptive metrics. Mansi, meaningful metrics for organization. Vikas +1. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an amazing opportunity to spend some time with you virtually. And there are a few things which I would like to talk about. One of the things is next week, there is an open program which we are running for enterprise coaches or enterprise change agents, where I'll be spending 16 hours, where we'll be talking about how do you bring agility in the organization. And there is tons of reading materials and a lot of activities and case studies and tons of stories we will be sharing and working together. If you're interested, feel free to join us. On the other note, we are looking for new partners who can work with Leadership Tribe. There is an opportunity for team facilitators. And if you're a person who likes a good challenge and looking to work with some amazing coaches globally, send your copy of your CV or a LinkedIn note and send it to hello@Leadership Tribe, and we will be looking forward to have more team members. We are growing and we need some amazing people with some great attitudes. As long as you can have fun and dance with us, you will be shortlisted. That's one of the criteria we have. So Andy, on that note, any final thoughts, sir?
I think I'd just like to say I highly recommend the ENT course, because I took it nearly a year ago, and now I get to work with this amazing guy right here. So definitely look into it. And yeah, if you're interested in facilitating and training, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
So on that note, longest way up, shortest way down. Have a lovely evening, ladies and gentlemen, and have a great Easter.